Okay. Okay. Everybody ready?
Ready.
You all set, Mark?
Yeah, I'm trying to tell it to do not disturb.
Okay. Okay, on three. Set, 1, 2, 3. Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 130 for September 1st, 2022. That's it. Summer's over. Oh, well. Oh, let's get on with it.
No. Don't talk like that.
Well, Mark, I see we have a special guest with us today before we get into the news.
I am so thrilled that my friend and our special guest, Lisa Lavender, has joined us today for today's Jancast.com.
Yeah.
And so we were joking about it that most of the time when she's introduced, there's fanfare and music in the background, and there's a lot of applause and a standing O. But
we can maybe dub that in afterwards.
And we're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Well, Mark, what's hot in the news right now?
Well, the more amazing thing that's going on there, Scott, is that we all heard about the fact that Fauci may be actually leaving, the government position that he held. And so there's a rumor out there that maybe he's engaged with the UN with their new resolution that says that the entire world has a right to clean and healthy environments.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden, who knows? Maybe Fauci just joined the cleaning team.
Yeah, or maybe he's gonna take up golf. You never know. Maybe he's going to finally get out on the golf course.
That's not as exciting as talking about like maybe he can help drive the whole concept of why it's important to be clean and healthy, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, the United Nations thing's interesting. The 161 nations approved it. For some reason, 8 countries chose not to, or they abstained from voting. But I did notice that Costa Rica's in there, which is one of my favorite places.
Yes.
They're down
well,
there.
it's got to make you wonder, the companies that abstained, is that because like they don't want a clean and healthy environment for their people? I mean, what were they thinking when they abstained from that? Like, I wouldn't want my name on that side of the page saying, well, this guy doesn't want it to be clean.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to report on what the actual document said, just to make sure it doesn't say anything about extreme cleanliness or anything like that trademark that we own.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Well, what's interesting is, most of our programs do revolve around different elements of cleaning. And one of the things that we've talked about for years is that cleaning isn't what people think it is. Many people define it in different ways. There's a different way of defining the word clean versus cleaning versus cleanliness. All 3 different words, different ways they're defined. And what's more important about that, if you're defining cleanliness, there's different levels of definitions. The definitions that a Johns Hopkins might have would be very different than a definition that an Amtrak station would have, right? So their definition of what's considered to be clean is quite a bit different. But one of the things that we always talk about is that there's, cleaning is not just about making things look and smell nice. That's not what it's all about. In fact, the last 2.5 years have taught us with COVID that, the cleaning industry in general has been elevated up on the center stage as being the front line of defense for human health and safety, disinfectants and sanitizers, and eliminating the spread of infectious diseases. So, that's another element. And then the third element that people rarely build into the equation of what cleanliness is about, or the act of cleaning, is protecting the asset itself. Anybody involved with commercial cleaning, they're given the care and custody and responsibility of, who knows, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of somebody else's assets, their building, their house, their property. And if they don't know what they're doing, they can damage it. They can ruin it. And, on the other side of the equation, we talk about that when it comes down to training somebody to do cleaning. But then there's this other set of people out there that they wear crowns, and they're the ones that if something does happen to somebody's building because there's been a flood or there's some kind of extreme event, then these specialty folks come in, and that's called the restoration industry. And Lisa, we are so thrilled to have you on this call. And Lisa is the COO of a company called Berks Fire Water, which is a company that was founded in Berks County, Pennsylvania, but has spread its wings over almost all of the Northeast U.S. Certainly maybe I'm exaggerating, but certainly
seven
there's nobody
counties.
Certainly, if
Close.
you're anywhere in Eastern Pennsylvania, in the greater Philadelphia, New York City metropolitan area, you probably know who they are. So they are the company that a lot of insurance companies will turn to when they have
Yeah.
a high standard of what they're trying to accomplish with restoring some damage. But the other thing that Lisa does beyond all that is she's been very engaged. Lisa, you and I met years ago through the IICRC.
Yeah.
And I was at that time, I was the division chair for the hard surface division, and you were one of the people I bowed to. And now we've become friends. I guess I still need to bow to you, or you'll tell me.
I think I was bowing to you, Mark.
But anyway, what Lisa has done over the last bunch of years, and the IICRC, I think, was in some ways one of the early catalysts, was to get engaged with trying to educate the world about what restoration's about, and the fact that it's not just about, you know, having the right chemical or the right piece of equipment. It's about knowing procedurally how to do things. You know, there's that marriage of having the right stuff, but having the right knowledge to do it. So Lisa started, you can see the sign behind her, a company called Restoration Technical Institute, which is an organization that's designed to help educate the community and the community at large. Not only people involved with the cleaning industry and the restoration industry, but even some of Lisa's own competitors will attend her Restoration Technical Institute in order to further their degree of knowledge. So with all that said, and you'd think I would run out of things to say about Lisa, you know, she's also a restoration poet.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If we're really nice to
Stay
Lisa,
tuned.
maybe she can share a little of that poetry with us at the end of the program.
We'll
But
see if you're
Lisa,
nice.
I know that some of the things that I've just brought up, and I kind of want to toss the ball over to you, that I've kind of put, you know, the restoration industry up on this pedestal of having this higher level of knowledge and sophistication than what the average, say, custodian might. And, you know, the question I want to throw at you is, you know, what does that word restoration encompass, and what does it take to get that kind of knowledge?
Yeah. Well, and you know, I'll say I don't put it up on a pedestal because I'm very passionate. I think that's what we bonded about, of just mastering your craft, whatever your field is, because there's so much knowledge, and I have so much respect for the cleaning industry specifically, and there's weaknesses. Restorers need to know techniques, processes, chemistry related to cleaning in the restoration of property. And so, you know, it's all very intertwined. It's just a little bit of a different application, I would say. So restoration, typically, like a very literal definition, is we're bringing something back to a previous condition. So people may think of, and sometimes they do, a restoration of a historical home or a vehicle and things of that nature. So our industry, some call it disaster restoration, because usually it's been impacted by something. And when I say impacted, it could be an accident, it could be man-made, it could be, you know, Mother Nature, storms, hurricanes blowing off of roofs. But it also can be microbial, can be environmental conditions that cause, you know, mold, or we deal with trauma, crime scene, biohazard, things like that.
Wow.
Vandalism, vehicle impacts can compromise a structure. And I actually, sometimes I just simplify it by, where are the people you call when you don't know who to call? Because I've seen all kinds of things we've done, because you know, who else would you call? But somebody from our industry. So
well, it's funny you brought up vehicles and houses, because that's been on the news lately. Just somehow vehicles are running into houses. And I think the reason for that is the houses are stepping in front of them. How do you hit a house? It doesn't.
Well, as a restorer, and it's definitely, I think, a geographical. Mark and I are in similar areas, so he knows how our roads are back here. But I mean, there's days where I'm like, how many vehicles are actually running into houses, because we get so many well, we call it vehicle impacts. I'm like, stop running into houses, you know.
Wow.
But we have windy roads, and
didn't realize that was a reoccurring thing.
I didn't know there was a formal term for it. I'm going to borrow that term.
Now you know.
Vehicle impact. Like, all right.
Yeah, I have a question from the left field that wasn't on our list, but how has your business handled in the last 2 years the whole COVID situation? And how's that changed your processes and procedures that you didn't have to worry about before that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, when the initial onset and in Pennsylvania, construction and there was a lot of grayness in what was allowed to be done. I mean,
yeah.
we were allowed to do all of our emergency services, but there were some gray areas because even we call it reconstruction or emergency services. It was like, well, what are you allowed to do and not do? So once we got through all that initial, we developed a series of protocol that just kind of tightened the processes of cleaning
Okay.
equipment, job site behavior, different communications with homeowners to make different accommodations and things of that nature. So we had to add some protocols, but you know, typically our day to day, you know, and those are things we would deal with, infectious disease all the time prior to COVID. So we were the people called then too sometimes. So, you know, it was kind of part of our DNA, but we definitely had to level up and put some additional precautionary measures in communication systems.
Good.
And we had to develop protocols even to execute. We were, I went on our first COVID clean, as it became known as, with my team. And, you know, I helped develop the protocol and how we were going to approach it before there was a lot of information even available, because that's what we were getting turned to help with in our community.
I remember beginning of 2020, Lisa, you were involved with a lot of local government agencies in trying to help cleaning companies and restoration companies get approved as essential services, right?
Yeah. And I mean, and one of the things, well, and this is kind of off topic, but I think it's a lesson for all industries, you know, in bringing up that, that subject is, as a training center, there's somebody I know who's really good at training in this. He might be on the call. Am I allowed to refer back to that, Mark Warner? So we developed this beautiful, amazing 2-day hands-on course for infectious disease decontamination. And it was August prior to the pandemic. And Mark said, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And that's how I advertised it. Come to this class, because Mark said it's not a matter of if, it's when. And nobody came. And so I put my team in, who was then now prepared when COVID hit. But then, and part of my point in saying that, it's not to make anybody feel bad, but it's, we constantly need to be aware. You know, people sometimes say, oh, you're lucky. You know, we built our Berks Fire Water turns 22 this month. RTI turns 10 this month. And it's kind of that old saying, is that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think in restoration and cleaning industries, we always need to be prepared, because people are counting on us for the health and safety of their environments, and so that they can live their lives. And, you know, if there's a lesson to be taken for everybody, I think it's, let's always be prepared and be proactive, because when we're called to duty and no one else, we're the only people to call, we need to be ready.
So
I was ready thanks to Mark, because I attended his class that nobody else went to.
I remember you grabbed on to that statement. It's not if, it's when.
Well, it gave me
you were saying that
even
before COVID.
Yeah. Well, you said it, and it gave me goosebumps afterwards, because I felt like I was reliving the moment, you standing and showing the globe of how quickly things in one part of the world. And it was like giving me, I don't want to say goosebumps and willies. I was like, oh my gosh. Because it was those initial months were so traumatic, I think, for everybody, you know. And I was like, Mark kept saying to us, nobody was listening, but I did.
Well, when it comes to doing things like infectious disease and COVID cleaning, I mean, that's probably not the most dangerous thing that you could be involved with in restoration. Some of the things like toxic molds and lead abatement and all that kind of stuff is probably more threatening. But is there standards of care that apply to all this?
Yeah, and the danger is always, like I always tell people, if you practice the proper safety precautions and you're wearing your PPE, you know, you're minimizing the danger. I mean, so, you know, we do full face half-face respirators, for all those things. And so, you know, that's part of the training. So I'm sorry, what was your actual question? I got off topic because you said PPE,
So
and that's
I-
a big, safety is a
yeah.
big thing. And I'm a believer that you can do almost anything safely if you do it safely.
So
Yeah.
even PPE, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize there's a difference between a mask and a respirator.
Oh,
And
yeah.
There's also
Oh,
a
yeah.
standard that revolves around respirators, and that's
Yeah.
part of the fit test to make sure that there
Correct.
is no breach. And, you know, there's a whole lot that goes into it that many folks in the cleaning industry never gave a ton of thought to.
Yeah. And
But,
that's something that's a, you know, segue evolution. If you expand into restoration, that's a standard protocol for new hires in restoration, is that they do the respirator questionnaire, fit testing, annual fit testing, you know, bloodborne pathogen training, global harmonization, which most people have to do anyways, things like that. But those are kind of just, it's automatic. Everybody gets trained and fit tested for a respirator in our business.
The part that I loved about working with you with the restoration industry was seeing processes and procedures that were so much more involved than what I had really been exposed to in the cleaning industry. So, you know, we might just run around and wet back up water in the cleaning industry. We just run a floor machine and scrub down an area. Yet everything that you do is kind of wrapped around the idea that we might be dealing with something dangerous. So you don't just back stuff up with a random back, and you don't just wear a dust mask, and you know, everything you do in every step of the way is wrapped around how do we protect ourselves from doing the cleaning and protect the environment from being further contaminated. And I was fascinated by that. And I remember saying to you, Lisa, like, how the hell, kind of like that, I said, how the heck do you get to know all this stuff? And that's where you were kind of sharing with me where your background came from and where you kind of launched from there.
Yeah, and that's my passion about training, because in general, whatever industry you're in, and why I opened the Restoration Technical Institute, because I think training and education brings so much success. And, you know, it's part of, I believe, our responsibility. And there's overlap in, you know, we're trying to make a clean, safe, healthy environment. And not everything, you know, you said something about the machines and the danger. You know, that's part of actually the education. So we do have standards of care, and we work off of science and definitions. And there's a lot of overlap because we do a lot of cleaning training with a lot of professionals in that industry, and make develop modules and e-learning. And, you know, that first step of inspect and assess is universal. So whether I'm going in and inspect and assess for purposes of deploying or executing cleaning for whatever my scope is, it's very similar to restoration. Now, part of it is I am evaluating the source of the water. If it's what we call a category 1, there's minimal, and we categorize as a category 1 loss. The water and the materials that have impacted actually have very little risk. So we're not going to be wearing PPE. We're not going to necessarily remove the materials. We're going to dry it. If we go through category 2, category 3. Category 3 is considered grossly contaminated. That could pose substantial harm to humans, animals, whatever. So then our protocol is set based on our inspection and assessment. And in water, it's going to be determined by what we believe the source of the loss is.
What's
There's
the
other
highest?
methods. Go ahead.
What's the highest level?
It's category 3, which is
it doesn't go any higher than 3.
Then we have another category that could be in all 3 categories, and we call that regulated material. So you could have a category 1, but it came in, but there is asbestos, lead, and things that would be considered category 1 regulated materials. And then we classify our water losses as well. There's 4 classes, and that's basically the volume, the amount of water. So every water loss is looked at as category and class. Category being contaminant level, class being amount. That's simple. It's really that simple.
So even I love how you simplified something that's actually so much more detailed than that. Even when you're talking about doing assessments, I happen to know you teach classes on how to do the hazard assessment as well as a risk assessment, and they're
Well,
different.
that's
Hazard
just,
doesn't change and the risk gets minimized and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I was
that's just
making
the
notes,
assessment.
Lisa.
That's just the
I'm in-
assessment. Then you still have to get into fixing the situation or correcting the
Right.
situation.
So, I mean, there's health and safety, and then you touched upon it, Mark. The word we use is we're mitigating, and we're trying to reduce any further damage. So we want to understand the materials, how water moves, and that's where you're using extraction. So whether you're using a shop vac or whatever, extraction is how you're removing the water. So we first extract, which is considered at least 1,000 times more efficient than dehumidifying it, which is now where you're going to bring in your so it's not wrong or gonna fail if somebody uses a shop vac, but I'm not extracting the maximum amount of water. So I'm exposing materials potentially to more secondary damage. I'm gonna need to potentially dehumidify it longer. So yeah, that's just a little water.
So a quick question for you, Lisa, is a lot of times the scope of work, you'll go in, take a look at something and build a scope of work about what you feel needs to be done. But aren't there other organizations like insurance companies and government agencies that will step in and say, we're going to require this to be done this way? And when they do that, aren't they then requiring somebody to be documented as certified?
Yeah, so they don't really, insurance companies and government agencies may require a specific certification. And you had asked me, and I think I went off on a tangent on safety. IICRC sets a lot of our recognized standards at GARE, their global standard setting body, and they actually, from water mitigation, mold, but they also have a carpet cleaning standard, a upholstery cleaning standard. So they create most of the standards that we recognize. Some states, depending on the state you're operating, especially for mold, will have very state-specific training requirements and guidelines. Some of you may have heard of New York City guidelines. That's a guideline, but we also have the S520, which is our microbial remediation technician guideline. So that's our mold guideline. So Mark loves acronyms. Like let's have a competition. Let's have an acronym off one day. People, you guys gotta stop talking in acronyms because it's like Chinese. And then they keep inventing new ones. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyway, so yeah, like he's lighting up at acronyms. But so yes, so insurance companies typically you will reach an agreed price with them on a job, and that's typically the standards are your backbone, and you're working together on an agreed scope to get to an agreed price. But nobody's setting your scope. You do that as the contractor. You're taking responsibility as being the educated, the one, and there's a lot of respect for that. The only times if you have to hire an independent expert will sometimes set the protocol, and you want to do that separation of duty and no conflict of interest, and then you may be executing it. So common practice mold, you might independent environmental professional may do the testing, set a protocol, and then you physically execute it as a restorer, which is the protocol becomes your scope basically.
Is it difficult to find, I mean, Mark and I have been talking for a while now about the difficulty of training and finding employees for positions. How is it in your industry as far as you're constantly looking for new employees to join you?
Oh yeah, the entire industry is. It's the same as everything, So I've been, but I believe, training's not the answer to everything, but I feel like offering training programs and being to tell people and giving the tools to actually do it, not just talk about it, where they have opportunity for career growth, reward, satisfaction. That's huge. And one of my recent initiatives I've been doing a lot of training with is, I call it wow boarding. And it's like, turn your onboarding into wow boarding. And part of that is, there's a lot of elements to it, but I'm finding, as people wow board, it's like those new people are actually bringing in new people. So there's a lot of good momentum instead of just, and when we talk about training, I'll throw this out because I know that's part of maybe why I'm here, training and restoration, but is, one of the biggest things for people's morale and to attract new people and their long-term loyalty, because I know that's an issue in every industry when we're bringing in entry-level technicians and we want them to grow and learn and see the opportunity, is self-efficacy. I mean, obviously, like, I'm all about having parties and food, Mark knows that, and feeding everyone, doing all that stuff, but having self-efficacy by giving people the ability and skills to do their job well is there's research on it. It is one of the biggest levers to drive morale and loyalty long term. And that's what perpetuates getting new people in.
Good.
So that's another part of my passion about training is
I actually, one of the programs that you offer, and I think you're the only person I've ever seen offer it, is that WOW onboarding program. It's a leadership kind of program. That is just something that you do, and you do quite exclusively. And I've been to that, so I admire it. But my question to you, Lisa, would be for all these folks that might be looking at a career path within the restoration industry, what are the most popular courses that you offer that seems to attract these folks to want to get engaged with the restoration industry?
Well, usually people's first stop is the water restoration technician course. And that's a prerequisite for some more advanced courses as well, like the mold remediation. It is a prerequisite, and you can take a journeyman and master's path through that curriculum. We also offer a lot of e-learning and online learning. I actually have for a short time pre-recorded WOW boarding on our website for free. So the water is a typical first stop. And, it's such a natural, for those of you that are in the janitorial industry and building services right now and have thought about it, water and mold is typically where people begin expanding from cleaning other building services into the restoration space, because it's a very natural segue, and it's serving, you're there, you're already trusted, and then when something happens, it's not uncommon. We actually train people who are managing facilities. I tell them we don't use the word mold, like don't scream down the hall, hey, I see mold. It's not uncommon. It happens, trust me. But we encourage people to use the word discoloration, because technically you shouldn't declare something mold, so it's been tested and verified to be mold. So we want to say there's discoloration, but I bring that up because those are common things we're seeing when we're involved in cleaning and maintaining a building on a ongoing basis in some capacity. So it becomes very natural for people to branch out and expand, and the skills are very applicable, and it's a natural segue, even the knowledge, like, your understanding of pH, even some of your equipment, things like that. It's, goes soot and fire, smoke and odor, although it's also probably a good next step. A lot of people, I would say, we use the word frequency. So as you can imagine, a lot more buildings get water or microbial growth than fire and soot. But we call it a structure clean. But a structure clean, it's not like what we would call a level 2 clean. We're removing soot and particulates from the air and stuff. But basically, a lot of the mechanics and science that we're using is very similar that we would employ in the cleaning industry.
Wow.
I know that one of the things that fascinated me when you were showing me around Berks Fire and Water was some of the equipment that you work with that's space age. Like you'd expect to see it on a space shuttle, not like in a cleaning environment. But don't you use things that are used to extract water out of electronics and other things that you would normally think would be toast?
Yeah, well, and we're not actually, so yeah, it's funny because it's all very overlapping. So we have a in-house contents restoration. So contents restoration, sometimes they could be wet. So the first step would be drying, but we're removing contaminants, soot, whatever else. So we have ultrasonic machines in the shop. We have an electronics station, which actually is the same kind of equipment the military uses to clean their electronics. So, and again, that's in the context of returning an electronic to pre-loss condition. We have a textile department. So when you think about its property, it's not just the built environment, but it's also what we call the contents.
Yeah.
So all the contents can be impacted and need to be restored too. And we use a lot of different, there's a lot of application of odor control. I mean, we have tons of equipment that addresses that. And that's something everybody, you're joking about just cleaning, smelling good, but smelling good is very important. And so we don't just want it to smell good. We want to remove. Source removal is our first step in our odor control process. So we remove the source, but we have lots of equipment and different approaches, because sometimes you got to try a couple of things when you're dealing with odor.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
and some of those classes I think are good for people who are just like an odor control class. Being able to manage odors is just good for anybody who's servicing a built environment.
Yeah, well, we know all about that. Well, we'll put in the show notes below the video contact info, so all those people that are listening to this and want to get into
Absolutely.
what sounds like a very, very interesting industry and a lot of potential for growth, they'll be able to get in touch with you. But
Absolutely.
I heard at the beginning that potentially we might have a poem that would come at that.
Yeah, I do.
Here.
That's my hobby. Is I actually call it restoration and cleaning. So I decided to do my carpet cleaning poem because I felt like it could appeal the most.
Yeah.
So carpet cleaning takes expertise, even though some think it is a breeze. Spots and stains should be scared when a trained pro comes well prepared. With knowledge, equipment, and skills, nobody worries about little spills. Dry soil removal is a must to make sure we get all the debris and dust. As Mark would say, it's not just carpet, we are living on top of it. Fiber ID and chemistry are a few of the things that are key to clean the carpets for the world to see.
Nice. Very good.
All
Excellent.
right.
Good job.
Lisa,
Well,
thank you so much.
yeah,
Thanks
a
for
lot for
having me,
joining
guys.
us
I really
on this.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, well, stay safe out there and dry and clean and everything else, right?
I will dry, clean, wear my PPE, the whole works.
Okay. See
Thanks,
y'all.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.